The war between Germany and the Soviet Union had entered its second year. According to Hitler's plan, the war against the Soviets had to end in 1942. He told his colleagues this was the decisive year on the Eastern Front. By now, the Americans had entered the war. If Germany couldn't defeat the Soviet Union quickly, the combination of America's massive potential for arms production and the Soviet Union's vast manpower would be catastrophic for Germany. Based on this strategic assessment, Hitler decided to concentrate all his forces on the Soviet Union in 1942, after which he could free up his hands to deal with the West. On the Eastern Front, Hitler reorganized his southern forces, dissolving the original Army Group South and creating two new formations, Army Group A and Army Group B. This time, his target was the Caucasus oil fields, the largest in the entire Soviet Union, with the secondary objective of capturing Stalingrad. Before launching the offensive, Hitler told General Paulus, commander of the 6th Army, "If I don't get the oil from Maykop and Grozny, I will have to end this war." This was no exaggeration. Germany was indeed facing a perilous situation. Germany was a country poor in oil and had been running at full capacity producing synthetic gasoline even before the war. When the war broke out, the German chemical conglomerate IG Farben already had 314 synthetic fuel plants, but the synthetic oil still couldn't meet the German army's needs. By 1942, Germany's oil reserves had hit rock bottom. If they couldn't seize new oil fields, the German war machine would grind to a halt. Capturing the Baku and Caucasus oil fields as quickly as possible became the driving force behind the 1942 offensive. Ironically, it was this very lack of fuel that would ultimately cause the Germans to falter in the Caucasus. Victories in late 1941 and early 1942 led Stalin to misjudge the situation on the battlefield. He ordered a Soviet counteroffensive, which ran headlong into the Germans. In May 1942, the German army defeated the Soviet attack in the Kharkov area, annihilating 3 Soviet armies and taking 240,000 prisoners. Stalin, who had painstakingly built up a small mobile force, lost everything in a rash advance and was severely weakened. In June, the Germans pressed their advantage and captured the Crimean Peninsula. Then they drove straight for Stalingrad and the Transcaucasus. Germany's army groups A and B swept eastward in a massive tide, with no enemy forces ahead of them and no reserves behind. Army Group A, commanded by Field Marshal List, consisted of General Kleist's 1st Panzer Army and General Ruoff's 17th Army, with air support from the 4th Air Fleet. Its mission was to conquer the Caucasus region. Army Group B, commanded by Field Marshal von Bock, included General Hoth's 4th Panzer Army, General von Wakes's 2nd Army, and General Paulus's 6th Army, with air support from the Don Air Force Command. Its task was to capture Stalingrad and protect the northern flank of Army Group A. Behind both army groups was a second line of forces. In this sector, the Germans amassed 60 German divisions and 43 divisions from their allies, totaling 1,200 tanks and assault guns, 17,000 artillery pieces and mortars, and 1,640 combat aircraft. Stalingrad, originally named Tsaritsyn, was located on the west bank of the lower Volga River. Stalin was intimately familiar with the city that bore his name. During the Russian Civil War in 1918, he had led the Red Army to repel an attack by the White Army there. After the war, it became a major transportation hub and industrial center in the southern Soviet Union, with over 100 factories like the Red October steel plant, the tractor factory, and the Barakati gun factory. It was also the gateway to the lower Don and Kuban basins, the primary sources of grain, coal, and oil. If the Germans captured it, they would sever the Central Soviet Union from the south and seize its food and oil resources the Soviets would lose and the Germans desperately needed. Stalin declared unequivocally, "Stalingrad must be held no matter what. We must stop the German advance at all costs." The German offensive was wildly successful. On the open steppe, the Soviet army could offer little effective resistance, retreating 200 to 300 kilometers and handing over the rich regions of the Don River and the Donbass Basin to the Germans. It was then that Hitler made an unforgivable mistake. He split his forces. The satisfying early gains of the 6th Army led Hitler to change his plans again. believing that capturing Stalingrad would not require so many troops. He ordered Hoth's 4th Panzer Army to turn south from the Stalingrad front and join Army Group A. Then, on July 30th, Hitler made the opposite decision. He announced, because the fate of the Caucasus will be decided at Stalingrad, the importance of this battle makes it necessary to draw forces from Army Group A to strengthen Army Group B. And so, Hoth's 4th Panzer Army was returned to Army Group B. This flip-flopping delayed the German deployment and bought Stalin precious time. In the Caucasus, List's Army Group A advanced rapidly. On August 9th, Kleist's 1st Panzer Army captured the Maykop oil fields. The Germans were now only 50 miles from the major Soviet oil center around Grozny and just 100 miles from the Caspian Sea. On August 31st, Hitler demanded that Field Marshal List throw all his forces into a final assault on Grozny to take the oil fields as quickly as possible. But the German advance was slow due to a lack of fuel. On August 19th, Paulus and Hoth renewed their offensive. Paulus's 6th Army attacked Stalingrad, aiming to cut off the 62nd Army from the main forces of the Stalingrad front. Under pressure, the Soviet forces withdrew from the city's outer defenses. On August 26th, the City Defense Committee issued a call to the entire population, "Emergency! Everyone to the barricades!" On September 2nd, the right flank of Paulus's 6th Army linked up with the left flank of Hoth's 4th Panzer Army, completely encircling the defenders of Stalingrad. The situation was exceptionally dire. Stalin appointed Zhukov as Deputy Supreme Commander and immediately ordered the 24th Army, 66th Army, and 1st Guards Army to Stalingrad. At dawn on September 5th, Zhukov threw these 3 fresh armies into a counterattack, but they were repeatedly defeated. On September 12th, the Soviet forces were forced back to the city's perimeter, having lost all their outer defensive zones. The Germans broke through Stalingrad's defenses, reaching the Volga River from the south and cutting off the 62nd Army from other units on the front. That same day, Hitler flew from East Prussia to Vinnytsia in Ukraine, where he summoned Army Group B's commander, General von Wakes, and the 6th Army's commander, General Paulus. He ordered them to launch a new offensive on Stalingrad on September 13th and decided to transfer 9 divisions from the Caucasus to reinforce the 6th Army. From that day on, intense street fighting began, with soldiers from both sides fighting over every street, every building, and every room. Stalingrad was reduced to a field of rubble, with 80% of its residential areas destroyed. Amid the debris and ruins, the Soviet 62nd Army resisted stubbornly, with fierce firefights breaking out on every street, in every building, and in every factory. Waves of new Soviet recruits sent as reinforcements from across the Volga were sent to their deaths. It's estimated that the average survival time for a Soviet soldier in the city was less than 24 hours, while officers lasted only about 3 days. For both Stalin and Hitler, the Battle of Stalingrad had become a do-or-die struggle. For Stalin, the city absolutely could not fall into German hands. He personally ordered it to be held under any circumstances. For Hitler, the symbolic value of Stalingrad had surpassed its strategic importance. It had to be taken. The new Army Chief of Staff, General Zeitzler, cautiously pointed out the danger to the 6th Army's long northern flank along the Don River and suggested withdrawing it to the Don Bend. Hitler replied sternly, "Wherever a German soldier sets foot, he stays." The Soviet command shifted its strategic focus from Moscow to the Volga region and mobilized all of the country's air power to support Stalingrad. In late September and early October, the Soviets moved 6 infantry divisions and a tank brigade into the city. The Germans brought in 200,000 reinforcements, including 90 artillery battalions and 40 combat engineer battalions trained in urban warfare, nearly all of Germany's finest remaining troops. The commanders on both sides were under immense pressure. The German commander, Paulus, developed a nervous tic in his eye, while Zhukov, in his sunless underground command post, suffered from eczema so severe he had to keep both of his hands completely bandaged. After 3 months of bloody fighting, by early November the Germans had slowly pushed to the banks of the Volga, capturing 80% of the city and splitting the remaining Soviet defenders into 2 narrow pockets. Despite this, the fighting within the city remained incredibly fierce. The battles for the Red October Factory, the Tractor Factory, and the Barikadi Gun Factory became known throughout the world. While Soviet soldiers fought the Germans, factory workers repaired damaged tanks and other weapons right beside them, sometimes even on the battlefield itself. The tanks were crewed by worker volunteers and often driven directly from the assembly line to the front, without even time for a coat of paint or the installation of gun sights. From a military perspective, Paulus's tactics were textbook perfect. Wedge formations, pincer movements, and deep penetrations. Each attack focused on a single point of breakthrough, with combined arms operations in the air and on the ground. The Germans had already taken most of the city. At this point in a battle, resistance usually loses its meaning, and the defenders either collapse or surrender. Yet the Soviets' resistance only grew more ferocious, almost maniacal. They fought with artillery, guns, bayonets, knives, and even fists, feet, teeth, and hands, until the life of the last Soviet soldier was extinguished and a deep, terrifying silence fell over the position. The street fighting in Stalingrad seemed less a contest of strength than a battle of wills. While the Germans were feeding their elite units into the Stalingrad meat grinder, the Soviet High Command was already planning its counteroffensive. Zhukov, who had been in charge of the overall strategy for the Stalingrad area since late September, began secretly massing forces. The Soviet Union's industrial potential and American military aid were now making their mark. By mid-November, the Soviets had assembled 10 armies to the north and south of Stalingrad. The counterattack was scheduled for November 19th for the southwestern and Don fronts, and November 20th for the Stalingrad front. The Romanian Third Army, responsible for protecting the German Sixth Army's flank, was routed in a single day. 5 days later, the Sixth Army was surrounded in Stalingrad. When the German High Command received news of the Soviet counteroffensive, Army Chief of Staff General Zeitzler strongly urged Hitler to order Paulus to withdraw from Stalingrad. However, Air Force Commander Göring assured Hitler that the Luftwaffe could supply the Sixth Army via an air bridge. It turned out the German Air Force lacked the transport capacity to supply such a large force. Its daily maximum of 300 tons fell far short of the required 700 tons. But Hitler supported Göring's plan, ordering Paulus to hold his position and renaming the army the Fortress Stalingrad Army Group. On November 21st, Hitler ordered the expansion of Field Marshal von Manstein's 11th Army into Army Group Don, with Manstein in command, placing Paulus's 6th Army, Hoth's 4th Panzer Army, and the Romanian 3rd and 4th Armies under him. Hitler's orders stated, "The immediate task of Army Group Don is to halt the enemy's offensive and retake the positions that have been lost." Manstein believed the only chance for success was for the 6th Army to break out of Stalingrad to the southwest, while Hoth's 4th Panzer Army attacked from Kotelnikovo, south of Stalingrad, to the northeast, linking up to rescue the 6th Army. But Hitler refused. In a public speech on November 30th, he declared he would never retreat from Stalingrad and again emphasized that the besieged troops must not surrender. Manstein had to cut a bloody path through to Stalingrad. Manstein's Operation Winter Storm failed to save Paulus. Instead, he found himself in danger of being encircled by a Soviet force several times larger than his own. He decided to defy Hitler's command and ordered Paulus to immediately break out to the south and link up with the 4th Panzer Army. However, without a direct order from Hitler, Paulus had no intention of breaking out. Citing a lack of fuel, he refused Manstein's order, squandering his last chance. On December 27th, the Soviets launched a powerful counterattack that pushed Hoth's 4th Panzer Army back to its original position. Manstein's Operation Winter Storm had failed. In the bitter cold of 49F, the situation for Paulus and his 6th Army grew increasingly desperate. On January 22, 1943, the Soviets captured the Gumrak airfield, completely cutting off the 6th Army's aerial resupply, transport, and medical evacuation. Though food and ammunition were critically low, the German troops continued to resist fiercely, believing the Soviets would execute any soldiers who surrendered. Intense street fighting erupted once more in the city. Conversely, the Soviets were astonished by the fighting prowess of the encircled Germans. Every soldier there was an experienced veteran. If this elite force could have been withdrawn, even empty-handed, Germany's future would have been brighter. Looking at a map, Hitler explained to Manstein, "First, even if the encircled army is broken into smaller units, it can still resist for a considerable time. Second, The Russians will not honor any promises made to the Sixth Army if it surrenders. The implication was clear. They were already cannon fodder. On January 30th, Hitler awarded Paulus a field marshal's baton to encourage him to continue fighting. He told Jodl, "No German field marshal has ever been taken alive." Hitler hoped Paulus would either fight to the death or commit suicide. On January 31st, Paulus sent a final telegram to headquarters. The Sixth Army, loyal to its oath and aware of its momentous mission, has held its position to the last man and the last bullet for the Führer and the fatherland. The next day, when Soviet troops broke into the German headquarters in a department store, Paulus chose to surrender. On February 2, 1943, the remnants of the 11 Corps, trapped in the northern part of Stalingrad, also surrendered. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. The Battle of Stalingrad lasted 199 days. Both sides paid a terrible price. Germany's largest army group, the Sixth Army, was completely annihilated, and parts of the 4th Panzer Army were destroyed. The names of 21 German divisions were wiped from the order of battle, along with numerous independent units. The Soviet losses were still greater than the German ones, totaling 1,129,619 casualties. The difference was that the German units were destroyed wholesale, their combat power gone forever, and new units would require a long period of training to become effective. In contrast, the surviving Soviet units could be replenished with new recruits, with veterans training the newcomers to quickly form effective fighting forces. Furthermore, Germany struggled to replace its personnel and material, whereas the speed and quantity of Soviet replacements far outstripped Germany's. As German Army Chief of Staff General Zeitzler said, "We lost 250,000 men at Stalingrad. That's like having the backbone of our entire Eastern Front broken." The battle caused Germany to completely lose the strategic initiative on the Soviet-German front and altered the balance of power on the European continent. The day when the Soviets would dominate Europe was not far off.